Lesson 13, the watch window. The watch window is another debugging tool that allows us to keep our eye on the value of a variable. As the macro runs and the variable changes, we can see the current value of that variable. It's also great, we can set it up to have the macro break automatically anytime the value of a certain variable changes. Also great for object variables, we can see all of the properties associated with a certain object. So in lesson 13, I have a larger data set. Looks like we have 776 rows this time. And I've written a similar macro to what we had in lesson 12. This macro will loop through and look for any of the internal inside sales, rep S99, and it's going to delete those. And then it's going to build the table at the end of the data set and finally copy that table out to a new workbook. Let's take a look at that code. We'll go to Developer, Macros, and then click Edit. This is another great way to jump directly to the code that we need. And I'll start to step through this code. Now, we're using some things here that you're going to learn in future lessons, like object variables in lesson 17. We're going to learn about loops in lesson 21 and regular variables in lesson 16. But I still want to finish off the debugging tools while we're in part 2 here. So I start to run my macro. Remember, we press F8 to run the macro, and I'm now inside of a loop. And as we go through this loop, I'm always interested in seeing the current value of the variable I. Well, one thing we do is we can go to the immediate window, Control G to get down to the immediate window, and we can ask to see the current value of I. Print I. So I is equal to 773. And if we run the macro a few more times, I might want to see the value of I. It's interesting, I don't have to retype. I can just click right after the print I and press enter, and now I can see that we're on row 770. And I could continue to do this, but you can imagine how tedious this would be. If you're in earlier versions of Excel, or if you have a fast computer, you can often just hover above the variable I, or sometimes click on the variable I, and a tooltip will pop up showing you the current value of I. And this is basically a shortcut for typing it down here in the immediate pane. However, if your computer is running low on memory, if you're in Excel 2007, that's more likely to happen. Here I have a situation where I cannot get the value of I by hovering, so I'm kind of in trouble. But we're going to use a great tool called the watch window. Let me show you how the watch window works. I'm going to hide the immediate pane here to give myself some more room. I'm going to right click on the variable I and say that I want to add a watch. And the expression that I want to watch is I. I'm just going to leave it initially as watch expression. We'll click OK. And I get a new pane down here called the watch pane, and I can see this expression I is equal to 770. Let me also add a watch for final row. So you can add as many watches as you want. You can resize this window if you get too many watches, so that way you can see more. And basically, as we go through, I'm going to run a few more lines of code. Each time through the macro, you can see down here the value of I is changing. So the watch window is a great way to keep your eye on a certain variable. Maybe I'm interested in when I get down to 2, so I can just sit here and hold down F8 until I start to get close to a certain value. The watch window is also interesting for something that we call object variables. Let me jump ahead here in our macro. And I'll set up a couple of object variables. We'll learn more about object variables in lesson 17, but if I set up a watch on an object variable, I don't just see one thing. We'll click Add Watch, click OK. You'll see that I have the plus sign, and when I click the plus sign, I'll make the watch window much larger here. We can see all of the properties assigned to that worksheet. So for example, if I want to see the name, I could come down here to the name property and see that it's currently equal to sheet 1, and so on. So sometimes you'll set up a watch with an object variable, and it's not going to report just one value to you. It's going to report many, many values. You have to use the plus sign. Another cool thing that we can do with the watch window is if you think that you're having problems with a certain variable, there's some certain variable that is driving you crazy, and you want to see what happens to that variable. You want to see exactly when the variable changes. What we could do is go to here and set up a watch and says add watch, I want to break when this value changes. Another option is break when the value is true. But break when value changes, I can now start to run this code, and when I finally change the value of final row down here, the macro will stop. So I'll click the continue button, and as soon as we've reassigned the value of final row, you see it's now equal to 1, the macro stops for me before it runs the next line of code. So the watch window, let's recap. There's 3 basic things that we can do with it. The most common is to watch a variable so that we can see the current value of the variable. Next most common is to set up a watch on an object variable so that we can see all the different properties of that object. And then finally, sometimes you'll use the break option in a watch that says, hey, stop code whenever this value changes, and allows you to basically see a section of the code very, very quickly.
Looking to advance your career by acquiring new skills? Tired of expensive off-site training programs? Wish you could learn from the best instructors in the industry? Look no further than live lessons. Self-paced, personal video instruction by the world's leading technology publishers. Each live lesson comes with a DVD featuring 3 to 4 hours of instructor-led classroom training, sample program code that allows you to work along with your personal instructor, and an example-rich study guide. Live lessons allow you to watch the entire course from start to finish, or navigate directly to any of the individual lessons. You'll literally watch over the shoulder of your instructor as he shows you how to build state-of-the-art applications. Live lessons, the power of the world's leading technology experts at your fingertips. To learn more, visit mylivelessons.com today.